Please help me to welcome our speaker. We have the charming and insightful Rance Green. Rance is the founder and CEO of needastory.com and the School of Story Design, and we are very excited to have him on our virtual stage. So, Rance, this session is all yours, sir.
Casey, thank you so much. I've never been called charming as an intro, so thank you for that. Feeling good. And thank you everybody for joining today. Thank you, Casey, for inviting me. Thank you, ELB Learning, for hosting this. And thank you all wonderful instructional designers for joining this session. It's always a pleasure to see when people are stoked about humanizing instruction. And today, humanizing it in a very specific way, which is going to be the main topic of our session today. So Casey, and you said that I'm, the CEO of needastory.com, and that is true. I own needastory.com, and our mission there is to humanize the workplace. We have a school called schoolofstorydesign.com, and that is where we train instructional designers, just like the people on this call, to be able to, from the very beginning of the conversation with a stakeholder, with subject matter experts, all the way through to humanize that instructional design process and to build a product that is humanized through story design. And the name of my book is, here's my book right there. The name of my book is Instructional Story Design. And today's session is really about exploring that process. But before we do that, I wanted to ask everybody who is attending today to put in the chat, when you think of the phrase humanized instruction, what pops into your head? What word, what phrase pops into your head when you hear that? Okay, so Rachel says relevant. Trish, making instruction real. So relevant, real, very related there. Relatable, all root words. Impactful. Stories, definitely going to be talking about stories today, Elizabeth. Connection. Casey, when you read through this list of the attributes of humanized instruction, what stands out to you as what really resonates with you?
Felia said memorable. That really stuck. And then also the relevant, relatable,
Mhm.
those words kind of hit home too.
Yeah. Yeah, because if you're building instruction that is relevant to your work, that means whomever designed it is really respectful of whomever they designed it for.
Mm.
Um, and the um, memorable part, something that sticks with me. Also, if it is designed well, then yeah, it will stick with you. And we're going to talk about some ways to make training memorable today. And Mary even said fun, um, empathy, Sabrina, connection, impact, Anna. Yeah, these are all good. And you'll notice a lot of these have like an emotional component to them. They make us feel something. Um, that's good. That's good because the thing that makes something memorable is really the emotional component of it. So awesome. Now, I'm pretty sure, Casey, that there are people on this call who are doing things to humanize training. And I'd like for everybody who's on the call today, think about things that you do before training, during training, or after training that you're really proud of, that humanizes that learning experience. Just give us a short description in the chat of what you're doing now to humanize training. For those of you who just now joined us, the question we're answering is, what are you doing now to humanize the learning experience? So Rachel is creating relevant stories, so that appeals to you, Casey, relevant. You're creating scenarios. Trisha, is getting the learner's thoughts and feedback on the training. So maybe the thoughts beforehand and the feedback after. That's awesome. Cassandra, reflective questions. You go. That is so good because that invites the learner to participate, doesn't it? Yeah. Are there any of these, Casey, that really stand out to you as, yeah, I could see that being a really good method for humanizing instruction?
Yeah, the reflective questions, the kind that really make you think, that sounds like a good way to go. And Debbie said real life scenarios, things that we
Mhm.
encounter. That seems really relevant too.
Yeah, I agree. So those reflective type questions spark critical thinking. They make us think. And critical thinking is essential when you're learning new skills. So I love that. Um, and then, yeah, creating um, relevant stories, real life scenarios that Debbie mentioned here, the real life scenarios, the case studies that you bring into training can be very, very powerful. But those case studies need to contain certain elements, and we're going to look at what those elements are in just a moment. Couple of others, um, acknowledge challenges learners may face and offer encouragement or support. Thank you, Paul. Asking the students what they are what they are expecting from the training, and then requesting feedback for future improvements. Thank you, William. Good. And Rachel, have the learner do. Yes, have the learner take action within the training. Love you, Rachel. Okay, that is what we're gonna be talking a lot about that as well. Cool. So, so far, um, Casey, do we have any questions before we get into this?
We actually do have an early question. Carol asks, what if your audience is engineers? They typically do not want stories, emotion, or any fluff. They just want the facts, the content they need to know.
All right, Carol, I have trained engineers before, and I have trained engineers who are training engineers, so double whammy. And I will tell you that you have a great advantage. Every single one of those engineers is a human. And we are wired for stories, whether we admit it or not. And the method that I'm going to show you today is the no fluff story method. So Carol, circle back around at the end. Let me know if what was shared today was helpful to you. All right. Well, I'm going to share with you, these are all wonderful ways to humanize the learning experience. So Casey, I'm going to start this whole session. I'm going to show you a very specific way of humanizing training. And it is called, of course, instructional story design. And I'd like to start with a story. As you view this story, this video, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the learner. And I want you to ask yourself two questions as you watch the story unfold. How do I feel? And why do I feel that way? And as the story is playing, you can put your comments in the chat as you're experiencing them. You might put, I feel respected because she included me in the conversation. So, how do I feel and why do I feel that way? Okay, are you ready? Nobody answered me. It wasn't a
Ready, we're ready.
Yay, thank you. Okay. Thank you, John. Thank you, Rachel. All right, let's get started. And here we go.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the call. It's 5 after the hour, so everyone should be here now. I'm Cindy, and I'll be your facilitator for today's session. Let's get started. Here's our learning objectives for today's session. Oh, let me turn off my video so I'm not distracting and share my screen. There we go. Okay, so as I was saying, here's the learning objectives for today's session. Let me go through them one by one, then I'll see if you have any questions. Any questions before we get started? You can type them in the chat. All right, let's get started. So before we go on, any questions about our objectives today? All right, let's move on to our first point. Any questions about the first point? Use the chat to type your questions. I'll take it that you're with me 100%. Let's move on to the next point. This is a really important one. There's a lot of information to get through. No, Bitsy, down. No, Bitsy, down. Down. Good girl. Sorry, that was Bitsy. She's a Rottweiler. I just got her. You know. Sorry. Like I said, there's a lot of information on this one. Really important stuff. So stay with me. I hope you got all of that. I know it's a lot to take in. Let me know if you need me to stop and explain anything, especially on this point. Anybody? Use the chat. Anybody? Okay. No responses. That's okay. Remember, you can use the chat to ask questions. We love questions. I like this next slide. It's great for visual learners. Now, you might not be able to read the smaller fonts, but I'll explain. Look at the 2nd and 8th bars from the left. Notice the relationship between how these two bars graphs are so great for learning. Any questions? Silence is golden. Now, this next slide is a little more interactive. How many of you know what this is? Anyone? It's the Grand Canyon. Has anyone ever been to the Grand Canyon? Oh, wow, nobody. I went once when I was a girl. I don't remember it that much, but the pictures, really amazing. Now, you might be wondering what the Grand Canyon has to do with our topic today. Well, not very much, but I thought it'd be a nice break from the content. I'll just keep the photo up while we go over this next point. Okay, that was a lot of content. Any questions? Any questions? Let me stop for questions. Anyone? Anybody have a question? You've been a great class. I've loved this. Thank you so much for your attention. I have one last question for you. What's one thing you're going to take away from today's session? Just type your answer in the chat. Anyone? Oh, we have someone who's been to the Grand Canyon. Fantastic. We'll have to talk about that offline. Well, thanks for your time, everybody. We'll see you next week for the second session. Bye-bye now.
All right, thank you, Cindy, for that riveting session. Looking back at the answers to that question, how did this make you feel, and why do you feel that way? So we have things like boring, feels a bit flat. I don't feel important. Rachel, thank you. What else do we have as far as feelings go? Rachel says, I don't feel engaged. Lisa, overwhelmed, disengaged. Paul, what's in it for me? Very mechanical, not engaging. Sabrina, I'm feeling disengaged, feeling like she doesn't take our skills seriously, just reading out loud. Good. So you're telling me here how you're feeling and why. That's great. Casey doesn't feel engaged at all. Her question, because her questions are generic. John feels overwhelmed because there's too much information, no detail to the demonstration, Leah. Sabrina feel rushed in thinking of questions. Emma's wondering why this was a live training. Nice. So some great boring. I started texting Mary. Okay. Thank you for that. That piece of honesty there. DD Dewey feels like I'm being told rather than taught. Vanessa feels alone, bored, alone. That's a very powerful word there. Began disengaging because too much info on one slide. No checks for understanding or discussion. Okay, so Josh and many others are typical instructional designer style, already giving advice to Cindy. Sometimes it's hard for us to just stop and ask ourselves, how do I feel about this? Why do I feel that way? Before jumping to giving advice. But you do have some good advice here. So let's continue that. What advice would you give Cindy for next week's session? Go ahead and put that in the chat. Some of you have said, ask some open-ended questions. Some of you have said, let's see, take time to understand the content. It feels like you're reading the bullets. Too much text on the screen, death by PowerPoint, no graphics on the slide. Additionally, let's see, Amanda says, let the learners tell you what they know. Then fill in only the blanks. I love that approach, Amanda. Mary, give me a theme and let me discuss it with the group. Rachel, skip the objectives. They know why they are there. Yeah, I agree with that, Rachel. Sabrina, leave her face on to have some human connection, more discussion, less just reading out loud. Make space for people to think and ask questions. Nice, Sabrina. Turn on your camera when you're asking the question from Vanessa. Make it more interactive from Cassandra. Less text, more graphics. Give the audience time to do exercises. Back to that action. Awesome. So these are some wonderful pieces of advice. Remember how you described what humanized instruction was before? Some of these pieces of advice will definitely humanize the learning experience the next time Cindy has to present. Okay. Oh, thank you, Mary. Yeah, so capture the audience in the beginning with engaging conversations. And you can do that, Dee Dee, in a virtual session as well. Even if all you have is the chat, you can ask questions that spark people to respond. Okay, we've got a lot of responses in this chat. Okay, awesome. So I would like to share with you a very specific way of humanizing the process. So let's look at instructional story design. I want to share with you the heart of the book and of the process. If you can get one thing, get this model. All right. So Casey, can we talk stories for a moment? Can you come back on and talk stories?
Absolutely.
Okay. So Casey, I'd like to share the story design model with everybody on the call. And so here we have story at the top. We have action at the bottom, and we've got this blank in the middle because we want our story can't be like someone else mentioned earlier, like the fluff. No fluff. We cannot have just a story that is random, irrelevant. It has to be relevant to the action that we're asking people to take.
Mhm.
So if you're taking notes today, you can put story, leave a gap, and then the action that you want people to take as a result of training. And we're going to fill in this gap, and this is going to be the story design model. So, Casey, when you think about a story that you read, that you watch, that you listen to, even a story that you tell, what are the components of a story that make it a story?
I always think about conflict, having a really interesting conflict, especially one where you can see motivation on both sides
Yeah,
of the argument. Also, things like plot and world setting, exposition at the beginning.
nice.
Um,
Yeah, it has to take place somewhere, so you have a setting, you have
right,
conflict. What about who's the subject of the conflict? What do we call those?
characters.
Yeah, characters. Yes, characters in conflict. So, Casey, you know what a story is because you engage with them every single day. Everybody on this call, including the engineers who you train for, know what a story is. And if I were to say, Casey, I'd like to tell you a story,
I'm in.
everybody's in.
Yeah.
Zoomed in, where our brains know what to expect. We know the framework, we know kind of the flow of how a story goes. And so it behooves us as instructional designers who are training people to learn things, learn new things, to master this skill so that we can speak not just to their brains, but to the whole person, to their emotions as well. And you mentioned earlier about being memorable. One of the great things about stories is that they are memorable. We remember a well-told story for a very long time. And what makes it memorable is the first thing you said about the components of a story. It's the conflict. And so the more intense that conflict is, the more it stays in our brain. So it's very important to have that in our stories for instruction. So if you want people to remember your story, your training, stories is a great way to go. What are some of the other, let me ask the audience here, what are some of the other benefits of using story in training? Why use stories in a training? Go ahead and put your answer in the chat. To draw the learner in, connection, examples, critical thinking. I think it can shorten the length of the training. You are right, Rachel. A lot of people think the opposite. But storytelling is so efficient, can depersonalize away from the learner to show good or bad practices. Yeah, can connect them, engage them. It's relatable, so it's easy to tap into the audience's previous knowledge. I love that, Joshua. Yeah, grabs interest. People can relate to the characters and therefore they relate to the content. You guys are getting all the right points. Yes. Helps connect the dots, connects with the participant with the story, especially ones with relevant details. Good. And I think what you and Dominic mean by relevant here is that it's helping them to take action. And that's one of the superpowers of story is that it acts like a flight simulator. And it's like you're living out the story yourself through these other characters. So I'd like to, so if you want your training to be actionable, stories is a great option. So stories are memorable, stories are actionable, and stories are emotional, which is why they are memorable and why they are actionable. So there are two essential components to a story for training, and they are these: relatable characters, and strong conflict. I use the word relatable to describe characters because our learning audience must have empathy for these characters. If they don't care about them, the story's going to fall flat. And there must be conflict. And that's why I use the word strong to remind us as instructional designers who like to show people the primrose path where everything goes right, that we have to have conflict in our stories. And it needs to be as strong as possible. And we'll talk more about this in just a moment. So, question. When you put relatable characters into strong conflict, and I'm going to ask Casey if she's available. Casey, when you put these two things together, how would you describe the feeling that you have? So if you're seeing a story, you're relating to the characters, they're in strong conflict, what's that internal reaction? What would you call that?
Hmm. Um, Impact. It makes an impression,
Mhm.
something that's kind of lasting. It sticks with you, the kind of thing that you find yourself thinking about, you know, later.
Yes. Yeah. And what are those things like? What are you thinking about? It's like these characters are in this situation. What are some of the thoughts that might be going through your head as you're watching it play out? And they're in this conflict.
I might be thinking how I might have reacted in that scenario.
Yes.
Um, if
Yes.
I've been in a situation similar, I might be kind of recalling past events in my own life, things like that.
Yeah. And all of those things that you just said are the wonderful um, superpowers of story. And everything you just said, what I call that within the model is a desire for resolution. It's like, man, I want these characters to win. I want them, how are they going to get out of this situation? What would I do if I were in this situation? So, relatable characters and strong conflict equals a desire for resolution. Thank you so much, Casey. So, once that desire for resolution has been sparked, the story has done its work. As you said, Joshua, the audience has invested themselves in the story. It has reached the peak of the conflict, and boom, story over. But we've still got, yeah, it sparks emotions, TJ, for sure. You've got this gap that we need to fill in. And of course, that is filled in with instruction. It's the instruction that brings this resolution that we desire. And there's a very specific way that instructional story design um, leads learners through using the story that they've just encountered to critically think and solve problems. Pretty cool. It's an exciting way to learn. So I'd like to share with you what Cindy does, what she does next.
I
So I'm going to share my screen just a moment. Okay, so the instructional story design method is akin to Addy in that the first step is discover. So that would correspond with analyze. Um, but I feel like discover also gives this sense of we are unearthing stories as we go through that initial phase. Now remember that Cindy Cindy's learning experience didn't just materialize out of nothing. Somewhere along the way, somebody designed this thing, maybe gave her the PowerPoint and said, here you go, have fun. Even before that, somebody had a problem that needed to be fixed and felt like training would be a good way to do that. And that is where instructional story design and instructional story designers really shine, is in that discover phase as we act not only as designers, but as consultants. So we're going to look at two artifacts that need to be created in the discover phase. So we're going to say that, Cindy has already determined that there's a business outcome, that there's a root problem, and that training is the right solution, right? We're not going to talk so much about that part of the process in today's session. We're going to look at the process of creating the story. So in the discover stage, she creates an audience profile. She learns more about who her audience is, and she creates an action list. So let's look at both of these artifacts, and we will start with the audience profile. Anytime I'm speaking to a new group, anytime I'm training a new group of people, I always ask these questions and develop an audience profile so I know how to design the best experience for them. So in addition to asking some things like, what do they already know? What's their role? What's their position? What's their tenure? Those are all good things, but I also want to know, what do they value? What are their current circumstances at work? How are they reacting to those current circumstances? What do they fear? What do they do in their spare time? And sometimes I hesitate to ask that question because I feel like, oh, that's not very professional. But I am always glad I do, because it keeps it in the forefront of my mind that these are people. And sometimes the spare time activities will make their way into my stories. When you get the answers to these questions about the people you are going to train, it answers the big question, which is, how will training benefit them personally? Is the training they're going to experience speak to their values? Does it take into account their current circumstances? Will it diminish some of those fears? So you can screenshot this if you'd like. Ask these questions and get to know your learning audience. All right, let's look at the second artifact that needs to be collected during the discover stage. This is the action list. Now, when Cindy goes back to talk with subject matter experts, she's probably going to get answers that look like this, and this, and this. But what is inherently missing in all three of these statements? What's missing? Type your answer in the chat. Thank you, Rachel. Action. Rachel is my action buddy. Thank you. Yes, what they need to do. What do they actually need to do as a result of training? So some good follow-up questions, if they are saying, be aware of our customer first policy, might be, what does someone do who is aware of the customer first policy? Where are they? What might they be doing at the time when they encounter an opportunity to do this? Good. Okay, so get down to the action. Observable actions. Like you could take a video of somebody doing this. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about observable actions. Drill down to those. Start with strong verbs at the top of each action. Put the actions in a logical order. So there might be some things that are done in chronological order. If they're not chronological, figure out the best way to order the actions that you're expecting people to do. Then ask the SME if you've got it right. So when you give this action list to the subject matter expert, often what you're giving to them is a gift because subject matter experts don't know their process. Most of the time, they don't know how to train other people on their own processes. So a lot of times when you give that action list to them, they might be like, oh my gosh, this is what we're asking people to do. Thank you so much. I've never been able to put it that way. Or they might say, yeah, this is almost right, but let's switch some things around here. You give them something concrete to react to. All right, this is how both of these artifacts fit into the story design model. You have the audience profile and you have the action list. So, what do you think corresponds with the audience profile? Of the two elements of story that must be present in a story for training, which one of those elements corresponds with the audience profile? Yes, that is right, Sabrina. Relatable characters. And what is the story element that corresponds with the action list? That's right, Rachel. Yes. So we can create relatable characters now because we have an audience profile. We know who our audience is, and we can create characters that that audience will relate to. And we can create strong conflict by putting those characters in conflict with the actions on the action list. Boom, we've got a tailor-made story for this course. And doing so creates a desire for resolution, followed by a specific way of instructing. We're going to look at that today as well. So Cindy does this. She goes back to her subject matter experts and she asks them, hey, who is this learning audience? And these are some of the things that she finds out. As you read through this audience profile, can you imagine in your head a character that this learning audience would relate to? Yeah, now you're working with something a lot more concrete. And so it's easier to create that character that's really going to resonate with that group. Okay, so in addition to creating this learning audience profile, she goes back and asks, hey, what does it mean? What does this mean? What do people do who are aware of the customer first policy? And these are the things that she discovers. Smile, ask, walk, engage, and say. Now, when you read through this, are these observable actions? Could you take a video of somebody doing these things? What do you think? Yes? No? Yeah, absolutely, Dini. You could, these are observable actions. Smiling at the customer, asking if you can help them, walk with them to find the items they need, engage in small talk as you walk. Say, thanks for coming in today. These are things that are trainable because they are observable. And it almost unfolds like a story, like chronologically. Okay, you can see like the customer coming, and now this person has a chance to smile at them, ask if they can help, walk with them to find the item they need, talk about things on the way, and say thanks. So this is what the subject matter expert means when they say customer first. These are the things we do. Now Cindy has a list of observable actions that she can train her learning audience to do. Good. So Mary asks, won't you get their attention faster with what they really want to know about rude customers? Or is that jumping ahead? So that would be a different action list, wouldn't it, Mary? How to deal with a rude customer. Then you would create an action list on how to deal with that rude customer, right? We'd have a list of actions that you would train this learning audience to do whenever they encounter a rude customer. So that's not part of this action list. This is kind of the everyday kind of interaction with a customer, but you're totally right. We could create another module in the course that how to deal with rude customers. Okay, design. Okay, so now we're getting into how do we design a story for this learning audience for this specific skill. So Cindy creates a cast of characters for her story, and then she puts those characters in conflict with the action list. You don't have to have a cast of characters for your story. Oftentimes I'll have one character who is in conflict with the action list. In this case, it's going to be 4. And then we're going to see how their interactions with the customer impact her. Cool. All right. Would you guys like to see Cindy's second attempt? Of course you do. Do you know why? Because you have a desire for resolution. That's why. See, yes, please, with exclamation points. All right, let's see Cindy's second one. And I'd like you to do the same thing. Ask yourself, how do I feel right now? Why do I feel that way? And you can put those answers in the chat as she is doing this. Let's begin.
Hi, everyone. It's the top of the hour. Welcome to today's session. I'm Cindy. I'll be facilitating this conversation today. I want to thank you for completing the survey I sent out prior to this session. Looks like most of you have been here for 2 years or more and are attending today's session to brush up on your skills. That's great because we'll be using the chat extensively and we'll need your expertise during the session. About 30% of you are brand new to our store. Welcome. These online classes will get you started on the right foot. Take the worksheet I sent yesterday and have it ready. I'd like to start with a story. Afterwards, I'll ask you a few questions. Just a moment while I get the video up, and here we go. Think about what just happened in that story. Is there anything that seemed out of place to you? Type your answer in the chat. Okay, yes. The floor rep is on her phone, not listening to the customer. They seem uninterested in helping the customer. Good point. Can you expand on that? What are the floor reps doing that makes them seem uninterested in helping the customer? Great. Yes, they aren't really engaging in conversation. They're walking away from the customer before she's done talking. These are great observations. Okay, let's talk about some ways these employees could behave differently. What are your suggestions?
Right, let's answer those two questions. How did you feel and why did you feel that way? Rachel says, camera on makes me feel more engaged. Okay, a simple tactic that humanized that whole experience. Pamela, I feel part of it since I did the poll. Nice. Yeah. She's getting to know who her learning audience is. Casey, I feel important and engaged because she was asking direct questions and looking at me. Nice, Casey. John says respected. Eric, I felt more invested in the story. Lisa, involved. Dee Dee makes it real. I can observe the behaviors. Yeah, observe the behaviors. That's a very, very good point. Amanda, I feel more empowered to share what I already know versus being told everything like I don't know any of it. Nice. Leah, so much more engaging, felt as if she wanted the input of the audience, like she wanted it. Right. Yes. Cassandra, I felt included. I liked how there was visuals, had a good tone, and was formatted to be interactive. Nice. Laura, I liked the reflection part where we need to find the answers. Yeah, so we saw at the end there, especially, we saw her asking for them to share, okay, what might these people do differently? Vanessa, definitely like the camera on. I felt like she was talking to me. I love that she asked a question instead of just saying, does anyone have a question? Any questions, anybody? Yeah. Good, good. So I'd like to share with you what she did. Um, Before that, though, let me ask, are there any questions? Casey, are there any questions that have come in?
We did get a really good question from Rachel earlier. She asked, can you talk about what to do when you are training multiple roles? She gave the example of like physicians, nurses aides, therapists, etc.
Right. So you might be training a group of 3,000 people, and all of those people, you have different roles within that big, huge group. But that big, huge group, even those big, huge groups, I find something about that group that most of them are dealing with, especially the current circumstances. Like what's happening, company-wide that can help inform how these people might be feeling when they come into a training course. What are they dealing with at large? If you have role-specific training, of course, it's much easier. You've got a narrower focus. But I challenge you, ask those questions of the big group, because I think you'll be surprised how how you can find that commonality among a big group like that to complete an audience profile. Excellent. Now, I would like to share with you what Cindy did during this last um, presentation that she did for this group. So first, she told a story, right? After she did her introduction, which was really good, helped communicate that, hey, I've taken the time to get to know you. Then she starts with a story. After she tells the story, she asks a reflect question, right? And she could have asked, how do you think the customer feels? Why do you think she feels that way? Did you notice anything in this that stood out to you? Then she asked them to solve something. And we heard that solve question right at the very end when she said, what might these people do differently? And then lastly, and we didn't get to hear this part, but she would give them feedback on their answers. Now, you've experienced that today, right? I started with a story. I told you Cindy's story. I asked you, how do you feel and why do you feel that way? Which got you thinking critically about what you just saw. Then I asked you to solve something. I asked you to say, okay, what's Cindy going to do next week, right? To humanize this experience. And then the feedback, I've been giving you feedback to each question or to each of your answers, and also either affirming, redirecting, and then following it up with my own method of instruction. So story, reflect, solve, feedback, it is a winner. You'll notice that a lot of courses today will put what's normally in the feedback way up at the front and do a lot of telling. Tell, test. This flips it around and respects the learner's ability to observe the story, critically think about it, solve problems based on it, and then they have a lot of glue for all of that feedback to stick to. So type in the chat what you're wondering about the instructional story design experience. Any questions that come to mind? Any aha moments? Take a moment to just put that in the chat. What are you wondering about instructional story design? The process, the model itself, the training part, story, reflect, solve, feedback. So Amanda asks, how do you see this method working for very technical training? Like how to build a dashboard in Power BI or how to code in a specific language. So Amanda, I've got a resource for you for that. It is it is a recording I did to answer that very specific question. So Casey at the end of this session is going to show you how to get in touch with me, and I will or how I can reach out to you. So I'll be happy to answer that question. If you go to schoolofstorydesign.com, click on free events and then roundtables and scroll all the way down to the bottom. You'll see all of our roundtables at the bottom of recording. Okay, so let's see what some of these thoughts are. Joshua, I'm wondering how I'm going to use this great info to make my next training about offering vertical feedback. Awesome. This is what I needed to make this training a good one. That's awesome. Now, if you guys do e-learning, stick around. I'm going to show you another example of e-learning. That's great, Joshua. Anna, I think this model is very applicable when there are staff where English is their second language. We all have stories. Thank you, Anna. Elizabeth, do you reference objectives when building the story? The objectives are what builds the story. The action list builds the story for me. Vanessa, but I don't put the objectives. That's not for the learner. That's for me. Vanessa, I now want to change all of our mandatory compliance training, but wonder how long it will take to create this story. Story creation is a skill. It's a skill you can master, and that's a skill that we teach at the School of Story Design. But with practice, it becomes second nature as our certified instructional story designers will tell you, it becomes a way of thinking. And compliance is an awesome place for stories. If you can get the stakeholders to tell you what they want people to do. Mary, I thought I understood this before, but really appreciate the concrete steps. Also, can you talk about the non-fluff story? So the thing that makes this non-fluff is that it is so concretely connected with the actions that you're asking people to do. It's not a random story for entertainment's sake. So what I've just demonstrated takes the fluff out. Reagan, this was fantastic to see a live training. What are some tips for the feedback section in an e-learning format? Let me go ahead and show you guys that. Okay, so if Cindy were to convert this live experience into an e-learning experience, again, she could start with the same story she shared in the live training, live virtual training. She might follow it up with something like this. How do you think the customer feels? And give the learner a chance to reflect on that story, critically think about it, and then put their answer here. There's not a right or wrong. It's just an opportunity to help them critically think about the story. Okay, so then they submit that. All right, now we have a variable here that took what they selected and puts it at the top. You said the customer could feel ignored or unimportant. Why do you think she felt that way? So here, the learner types their answer here, they submit it. Okay, the next slide, another variable. What might they have done differently? Again, they type their answer here, and this could be, any of these could be multiple choice, or this just happens to use open text fields. Okay, so again, we've taken what they've suggested, put it as a variable at the top. Keep these suggestions in mind during the following activity as you choose a better response to the customer. Okay, here we have a multiple choice question. We have a picture of the story, so instant recall about what this is talking about. We have these options. You'll notice that all the options are the same length. They all start with the same phrase. It's not a giveaway what it is at first glance. You actually have to think through. And then you've got, so if you answer A, you've got feedback that explains why that answer is correct or incorrect. And this prompt to use the customer first job aid. What's that? Oh, let's look at the customer first job aid. Oh my gosh, it's a pretty action list, right? So action lists translate into a beautiful job aid. Okay, now they can answer. And again, they get the why behind why their answer is correct here. Same method, story, reflect, solve, feedback. Now there are several actions that Cindy is training on, so there might be several solve, feedback as she goes down the action list and creates activities for each one of those. It's methodical, it's really wonderful. So, two elements of a story that make it a story that must be present in a story for training: relatable characters, strong conflict, equals a desire for resolution. Boom, there's our instruction. Story, reflect, solve, feedback. Boom, our audience is taking action. This is the link I was talking about earlier. You can scan that, go to the roundtables page, scroll to the bottom, and look for the technical training video. Casey, thank you so much for inviting me. Everybody else, thank you so much for your engagement, for bringing your insights into this conversation.
Yeah, this was a really good one. A lot of good feedback and insights in the chat section. We appreciate you so much. And like Rand said, there'll be a survey right after this webinar closes. Let us know if you want to hear from Rance directly. And thank you so much, Rance, for all of this information, the charming, the charming related. It
Turning
was
on the charm.
so good. Such good content. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone who joined us today. Thanks, guys.
Keep telling stories, everybody.